On November 8, 1942, a German cavalryman crouched behind a stone wall in North Africa. He had survived Poland, France, Russia. He trusted his rifle. Then the Americans opened fire, and in less than 1 minute, everything he believed about warfare collapsed. This is the story of the rifle that didn't just outshoot Germany, it broke its doctrine. November 8, 1942. Sidi Bouzid, Tunisia, North Africa. The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky terrain as Oberreiter Wilhelm Schmidt crouched behind a low stone wall, his carabiner 98K gripped tightly in both hands. For Schmidt, the rifle was more than a weapon. It was routine. It was muscle memory. It was the rhythm of war itself. Load 1 round. Fire. Lift the bolt handle. Eject the spent casing. Push forward. Chamber the next round. Fire again. This rhythm had carried German infantry across Poland in weeks, through France in months, deep into the Soviet Union. 5 rounds in an internal magazine. Each fired deliberately, each shot placed with care. German infantry doctrine had been built around this idea for generations. Accuracy over volume, discipline over speed. And it had worked. Until now, across the dusty field, American infantry advanced in a loose skirmish line. Schmidt had been briefed on them. Americans were supposed to be inexperienced, industrial soldiers, soft, overconfident, poorly trained. Their equipment, German intelligence claimed, was heavy and inefficient. Their tactics crude. Their reliance on firepower a sign of weakness. Schmidt raised his rifle, exhaled, and fired. Then the Americans returned fire. And the sound was wrong. It wasn't the familiar crack, pause, crack of bolt-action rifles. There was no rhythm, no breathing space, no moment to lift the bolt and reacquire the target. Instead, Schmidt heard something closer to a sustained roar, controlled, aimed, relentless. 8 rounds fired as fast as fingers could pull triggers. No pause, no interruption, just continuous, accurate fire. While Schmidt managed to fire perhaps 3 rounds, the American soldier opposite him had already emptied his entire 8-round clip and was reloading. This was the M1 Garand. And in that single minute, German infantry doctrine began to die. German soldiers were trained to count shots. They were taught to exploit reload cycles, to move when the enemy worked the bolt, to rise when fire paused. Against the Americans, those pauses never came. Every time Schmidt lifted his head to fire, multiple rounds snapped back instantly. Suppressive fire didn't come from a machine gun, it came from every rifle. The mathematics were brutal. In a 2-minute engagement, a German rifleman might fire 30 aimed rounds. An American rifleman could fire 80. But more important than numbers was continuity. The German soldier had to break his sight picture, cycle the bolt, reacquire the target. The Americans simply kept firing. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. German infantry had been raised on the belief that German arms were superior, that German training overcame material disadvantages, that discipline compensated for technology. Now, individual German soldiers, well-trained, experienced, confident, found themselves losing firefights against men they had been told were inferior. That belief system collapsed under fire. This wasn't just a new rifle. It was a forced tactical revolution, one Germany had not prepared for. The carabiner 98K had represented the pinnacle of bolt-action design. Adopted in 1935, it was accurate beyond 500 yards, reliable in mud and snow, simple enough for conscripts, and deadly in trained hands. It fired the powerful 7.92 by 57 millimeters cartridge, capable of penetrating cover and bodies alike. And in earlier wars, it had been enough. But the M1 Garand changed the equation entirely. German intelligence had seen the Garand on paper. 8-round capacity, semi-automatic operation, heavier than the Kar 98K. Analysts concluded, more firepower but less precision, more complexity, less reliability. They were catastrophically wrong, because the Garand had already been tested, not in Europe but in the Philippines, in jungle combat, in dust, in foxholes. Japanese troops had mistaken Garand fire for machine guns. General Douglas MacArthur praised its reliability under brutal conditions. By the time German troops met it in North Africa, the rifle had already proven itself in real war. The Garand's gas-operated system cycled the action in a fraction of a second, maintaining barrel-to-sight alignment between shots. Accuracy did not suffer. Springfield armory tests showed 4-inch groupings at 100 yards, often better. This wasn't spray fire. This was precision repeated relentlessly. German doctrine depended on machine guns to dominate firefights. The MG-34 and MG-42 were terrifying weapons, but they were crew-served, ammunition-dependent, and vulnerable. The Garand distributed firepower across the entire squad. Suppressing an American unit meant suppressing every man. And that was something German infantry had never trained to do. By 1943, entire American divisions were armed with M1 Garands. By D-Day, nearly every American rifleman carried one. Germany was still issuing bolt-action rifles by the millions. The imbalance wasn't technical anymore. It was systemic. And as German forces fought from North Africa to Italy, from Normandy to the Ardennes, the lesson repeated itself again and again. Excellence with inferior weapons produces inferior results. The M1 Garand didn't win the war alone. But at the place where wars are truly decided, the individual firefight, it gave American soldiers a decisive, measurable edge. For decades, German infantry doctrine had been built on one unshakable belief: precision beats volume. At the center of that belief stood the Carabiner 98K, officially adopted in 1935 and widely regarded as one of the finest bolt-action rifles ever produced. Accurate, rugged, and brutally reliable, the Car 98K was designed for deliberate, aimed fire. Chambered in the powerful 7.92 by 57 mm Mauser, it could penetrate cover, maintain accuracy out to 500 meters, and function in mud, snow, dust, and extreme cold. To German officers, this rifle was not a limitation. It was a symbol of military discipline. German infantry training emphasized fire control, not speed. Every shot was meant to count. A well-trained soldier could fire around 15 aimed rounds per minute, cycling the bolt smoothly, maintaining sight alignment, conserving ammunition. Against Polish, French, and British forces, many of whom also relied on bolt-action rifles, this doctrine had worked perfectly. Entire campaigns had been won with this system. So when intelligence reports began arriving about American forces, German analysts were unimpressed. The Americans, they said, were industrially powerful but tactically immature, over-reliant on firepower, undisciplined, loud. Yes, the Americans carried a semi-automatic rifle, the M1 Garand, but on paper, it didn't seem revolutionary. It was heavier than the Car 98K. It used an 8-round clip instead of a stripper-loaded internal magazine. And its semi-automatic action was assumed to be less accurate, less durable, and more prone to failure. German doctrine viewed this as a trade-off: more bullets, less control. In theory, German riflemen would outshoot Americans by remaining calm, precise, and methodical, letting the enemy waste ammunition while German soldiers picked their shots. What German intelligence failed to understand was one critical detail. The M1 Garand did not sacrifice accuracy. And more importantly, it didn't just change how fast soldiers fired. It changed how infantry combat worked. By the time German units encountered American troops in North Africa during Operation Torch, the M1 Garand was not an experimental weapon. It had already survived nearly a year of brutal combat in the Philippines, where Japanese soldiers reportedly believed they were facing machine guns, not rifles. But none of that mattered on paper. On paper, German doctrine still looked superior, and that false confidence would soon collapse, not gradually, but violently, under the sound of continuous rifle fire that simply did not stop. By November 1942, during Operation Torch, German infantry entered combat believing they understood modern warfare. For decades, German doctrine had been built around a simple principle: precision over volume. The Carabiner 98K was not just a rifle, it was the physical expression of that philosophy. Accurate, reliable, deadly in trained hands. 5 rounds, one shot at a time. Every trigger pull meant breaking your sight picture, cycling the bolt, reacquiring the target. German infantrymen were trained to make every bullet count. And against Polish, French, and British troops, most of whom carried bolt-action rifles, this system worked. But North Africa introduced a new enemy and a new reality. When American units engaged German defensive positions, something felt wrong. The fire never stopped. Not bursts from machine guns, not scattered, panicked shooting, but continuous, aimed rifle fire coming from every direction. German soldiers raised their rifles, fired, worked the bolt, and before they could fire again, multiple American rounds were already coming back. The mathematics were brutal. A trained German rifleman could fire roughly 15 aimed shots per minute. An American armed with the M1 Garand could fire 30 to 40 without sacrificing accuracy. This wasn't just higher firepower. It was uninterruptible pressure. German doctrine depended on moments of exposure, brief windows where soldiers could aim, fire, and relocate. The M1 Garand erased those windows. Every time a German soldier lifted his head, the response was immediate. Suppression no longer came only from machine guns. It came from every American rifleman. Entire German squads found themselves pinned down by men they had been told were inexperienced, poorly trained, and tactically inferior. That belief collapsed under fire. Captured German reports from the Italian campaign and North Africa would later describe a consistent pattern. American infantry firepower is overwhelming, even without machine gun support. For the first time, German infantry faced an enemy where every individual soldier functioned like a light machine gun. And once that realization set in, there was no going back. The most devastating effect of the M1 Garand was not mechanical. It was psychological. German soldiers had been conditioned for years to believe in the superiority of German weapons, German doctrine, and German training. They had marched across Poland, broken France in weeks, survived the opening phases of Barbarossa. Their confidence was not arrogance, it was built on experience. And then, in North Africa and Italy, that confidence was shattered. German infantrymen were doing everything right. They were trained. They were disciplined. They were using cover correctly. Yet they were losing firefights consistently. Veteran soldiers reported something deeply unsettling. They could not return fire without being immediately suppressed. Every attempt to aim was answered by a storm of incoming rounds. This wasn't chaos. It was controlled, relentless pressure. The enemy wasn't firing wildly. They were firing accurately, continuously, and from multiple positions at once. For German soldiers raised on the belief that American troops relied on brute force and poor tactics, this was deeply destabilizing. Captured German intelligence reports from 1943 onward show a clear shift in tone. The language changes. Early assessments describe Americans as technically well-equipped but tactically naive. Later reports abandon that narrative entirely. Instead, they warn commanders that American riflemen generate suppressive fire without machine guns, advance aggressively under cover of rifle fire, win firefights even when outnumbered. The psychological toll was real. German soldiers began to hesitate. Hesitation meant exposure. Exposure meant casualties. Morale suffered not because German troops lacked courage, but because their training no longer guaranteed survival. And the German high command knew it. They understood that this was not a temporary disadvantage. It was a structural problem, so they tried to fix it. Germany rushed to field a semi-automatic infantry rifle of its own. The result was the Gur 41. On paper, it was the answer. In reality, it was a disaster. Rigid design requirements, including a refusal to drill a gas port in the barrel, forced engineers to use complex gas trap systems at the muzzle. The rifle was heavy, unreliable, difficult to clean. Soldiers hated it. Production numbers remained painfully low, and frontline units rarely saw one. Meanwhile, American factories were turning out hundreds of thousands of M1 Garands, arming entire divisions with a weapon Germany could barely replicate in small batches. By the time Germany corrected its mistakes with the WWII, it was already too late. The psychological damage had been done. German infantrymen now knew something they couldn't unlearn. They were no longer facing equals. They were facing an enemy whose individual soldiers had a decisive technological edge. And that realization followed them into every engagement that came next. Germany did not ignore the problem. It simply ran out of time. By late 1943, the German High Command fully understood what it was facing. Reports from North Africa, Italy, and the Eastern Front all pointed to the same conclusion. Bolt-action rifles could no longer dominate modern infantry combat. The response came in two forms. The first was the WWII. Unlike its predecessors, the G43 abandoned flawed gas trap systems and adopted a conventional gas-operated mechanism. It fed from a detachable 10-round magazine and offered a rate of fire closer to what German soldiers had been facing since 1942. On the battlefield, soldiers who received the G43 appreciated it. It worked, it hit hard, and it finally allowed German infantrymen to return sustained fire. But the numbers told the real story. By the end of the war, fewer than 45,000 G43 rifles had been produced. For every G43 issued, dozens of Kar 98K rifles continued to roll off assembly lines. Entire divisions never saw a single one. And even when issued, the G43 suffered from shortages of spare parts, inconsistent manufacturing quality, and ammunition supply problems as German industry collapsed under bombing and material shortages. The second response was more radical. The Sturmgewehr 44, the world's first true assault rifle. Firing an intermediate cartridge from a 30-round magazine, capable of both semi-automatic and fully automatic fire, the STG-44 represented a revolution in infantry combat. At close and medium ranges, it was devastating. German soldiers who carried it knew they finally possessed something that could challenge Allied infantry firepower. But again, the numbers. Approximately 425,000 STG-44s were produced, mostly in the final year of the war. Too few, too late. Many units received the rifle without adequate ammunition. Others never saw it at all. Logistics failed where engineering succeeded. Meanwhile, American infantry divisions had been fully equipped with M1 Garands years earlier. This was the decisive difference. The United States did not introduce a superior weapon at the end of the war. It introduced it before the war truly began. By 1944, American doctrine, training, and tactics were built entirely around the assumption that every rifleman could deliver continuous, accurate fire. German doctrine was forced to adapt on the battlefield, under fire, with no time to redesign its force structure. At places like Normandy, the Italian mountains, and the hedgerows of France, the outcome became predictable. German positions could be held. They could be defended, but they could not dominate. Every engagement drained manpower faster than it could be replaced. Every firefight favored the side that could fire first, faster, and longer. The war was no longer decided only by courage or experience. It was decided by industrial foresight, by the ability to equip millions of soldiers with weapons designed for the next era of warfare, not the last. Germany had brilliant engineers. What it lacked was time. And in war, time is often the most lethal weapon of all. War is often remembered through battles, flags, and generals. But for the men who fought it, history was decided in seconds, in moments measured by how fast a rifle could fire, how long a soldier could stay exposed, and whether he could return fire before the enemy did. For German infantrymen trained in discipline, precision, and tradition, the shock was not just tactical. It was psychological. They had been taught that superior training and doctrine would always prevail. Then they faced a weapon that rewrote the rules. The M1 Garand did not make American soldiers braver. It made them deadlier. It allowed ordinary men to generate extraordinary firepower, not as machine gun crews, not as elite units, but as individual riflemen. In the time it took one soldier to work a bolt and realign his sights, another could fire 8 aim shots without pause. And that difference echoed across North Africa, through the hills of Italy, across the beaches of Normandy, and into the heart of Europe. Germany eventually built answers. The G-43, the STG-44, brilliant weapons born too late, because wars are not won by ideas alone. They are won by who arrives first, who equips fastest, and who understands tomorrow's battlefield before stepping onto today's. The metallic ping of an empty clip may sound insignificant now, but on the battlefields of World War II, it became the sound of inevitability, the sound of a new era of warfare, and the moment when the age of bolt-action armies quietly came to an end. If you want to uncover more moments like this, the hidden decisions, the overlooked weapons, and the small details that changed the course of wars, then stay with us, subscribe to the channel, and keep exploring the stories history rarely explains, but never forgot.